Today on Substance Stories, we're going to be talking about how to have a healthy diet and how that leads to a healthy mind. Today on Substance Stories, we're going to be continuing our series on things that we can put into our life to make sure we have good mental health. Remember, good mental health is, if I have good mental health, then I'm less likely to get a mental illness. And if I have a mental illness, I'm more likely to have a well-managed mental illness. So good mental health is relevant to all of us. And today I want to talk about diet, right? So diet is so key. And when I talk about diet, I don't want people to think I'm talking about losing weight. I don't care what you look like, how you look like, as long as you love yourself and as long as you love who you are. That is the most important thing. But I am going to talk about diet in terms of good mental health. So in about the 60s and 70s, the mass processed food industry sort of kicked in. And since then, obesity rates have tripled, quadrupled, attention levels are falling. There are all sorts of awful illnesses that are attached to this. And people will say things like, obesity is because of the genetics. Well, no. Aliens haven't inserted a random bunch of genes into our gene pool over the last 70 years. What has happened is the mass-processed and hyper-processed food is destroying our minds and our bodies. So what can we do about that? Well, it's actually really obvious now what is a healthy diet. And a healthy diet is whole foods. That's foods that have been processed less and less, and fresher foods and variety, right? So we want to be having fresh veggies, fresh food, grains, meats, fish, variety. Try to have a bit more protein than you would carbs. Don't overthink it too much. One thing that I find really frustrating when people talk about this is like, oh, great, Rich, says I need to go out and eat fresh food. Well, that's easy for me in my, 60-hour work week with rising cost of living. Well, there are ways that we can do this, right? We can put aside a day of the week to do food prep. We can do that with a friend. We can get those things like, I don't want to name brands, but like HelloFresh and Dinnerly and those sort of things that deliver food to you that is half already made. And do you know that they are massively better for the environment because they shipping costs, the transport is doing mass delivery, so it's less transportation costs, and there's basically no food waste, and food waste is like the worst thing for the environment. But more importantly, they get making sure we have fresh meals at least once or twice a week, or however many times we're doing them. So they're really good. And finally, you can get those refrigerated foods where they're sort of pre-made locally and refrigerated, and they're quite affordable if you buy them on bulk, but you've got to look out for them because some of them are using lots and lots of preservatives, and we want to avoid that. Essentially, one of the things people would say is, if you look at the ingredients to a food and your grandma wouldn't have recognized any of these ingredients, it's not food. Food should be made up of smaller food. It shouldn't be made up of numbers and random letters. So when you go into a supermarket, you just try to stay on the outside. You go in, you see the fruit and veg, you see the dairy, you see the meat, you get out of there. I think anything that comes in a packet has been mass produced, and there's now really overwhelming evidence. Overly processed food is really shocking for us. So I'm going to have a dietitian on in a few weeks, and we're going to talk about this in more depth, and we're going to go into how we can do this without over-obsessing, but still making sure we're eating good, healthy, not hyper-processed food. And most importantly, how we can do this with a good time budget and a good financial budget. But I think for now, just broadly speaking, make sure you avoid hyper-processed food, make sure you're thinking about what you eat in a mindful way, and make sure that you are, putting time aside in your week to sort of think about your food. Thank you so much for listening.